Everyone, I hope you're having an amazing day. So in my last lecture, I talked about data types, right? Talked about booleans, talked about strings, um, integers, double, right? So today I'm going to talk about date time, enums, right? And an object, right? So these are the ones I'm going to talk about today. And the next episode, I'm going to talk about collections because there are data types as well, and you should know if you're working with Apex, right? So today we're going to talk about date times, right? As I said. So the first thing first, I've logged into my org, and I trust everyone have registered for their own org. If you haven't, I would highly encourage you to do so because it's very important you do hands-on, not just watching the video, right? Because it's not enough, right? Because you need to practice out yourself because this course is specially designed for admins, right? And so if you don't practice it, right, then it's very difficult to get into that programming side of things, right? So I would highly encourage you, it's a request that you please practice it. Okay, so I'm going to go to the developer console, as you know by now. So go to the setup here and go to developer console, right? Now, data's been interesting, okay? So let's go to the debug and open execute window, right? Okay. So as I mentioned, we got date time and date as a data type, right? So whenever you deal with dates, right? So let's say if you are passing an information to an API, right? Then you need to pass the date, right? So often it's good to store in a date and then you can also specify the date format. Like for instance, some of the APIs may not accept in DDMMYY, they accept probably in YYY, DDMM, or whichever way, right? Some accept American standard, some accept English British standard, right? So you can configure it, and that's where it's very powerful to use the date data type and use the format functionality of a date data type. Don't get overwhelmed. I will explain to you each and everything today, okay? The first thing, okay, let's deal with the date first, okay? So we have a date. This is the data type, date, okay? So, and then we have something called date time, okay? So now, let me show you how the date time works, okay? So I wanted to say, let's say I wanted to display today's date, right? So how to do that? It's pretty straightforward. So you can say date time, okay? That's the data type. And then we have to define the name of a variable, right? So let's say today date, okay? Right, nice and easy. Now, what do? I wanted to assign today's date to this variable, right? So how to do that? So there is something called system, right? And just type system.now. See, when you do now, okay, so one thing I wanted to talk about intelligence, right? So you might wonder how this option came about, right? This, where I've been given a kind of assistance by this developer console with or in other words, a suggestion to choose this information, right? When I do system dot, I got all of this information, right? Now, how do you get this? So when you type system, right, and you do dot, it automatically shows up. This is what we call intelligence, right? If you came from other programming language, you would know. But since I assume you haven't done programming before, so this is how we can say auto suggestion, in other words, right? You might have seen, it's similar to like an auto suggestion, but it's actually called intelligence, right? Okay, so when you do system, right, when you do dot, it brings up all the methods that's belonging to the system. Now you wonder what the heck it is method, right? Okay, don't you worry. For now, our main interest is to display today's date, right? So there's something called now, right? Now, when you do now, so you can see this one now, okay? And this is how you define now. And one thing I forgot to tell you, every statement in Apex ends with a, semicolon, right? Cool. Otherwise, it will not run. It will complain, right? So, okay, now we have today's date, okay? Now what we're gonna do, I'm gonna do system.debug, okay? And we're gonna do today's date, okay? So let me show you what it will display, okay? Right, now let's do execute. And it takes a minute, right? Don't worry about all of this. So just do debug only. You see, we got date and time, right? So this is exactly what it says, date, time, date and time, right? Today's date. So you can see the time. It's an American standard, right? It's year, month, and date, right? Because in New Zealand we use the other way around, but that's fine, not a problem. And this is the time, right? Now I'm not interested in time. I don't want to see it's like whatever time it is, okay? So I only wanted to do the date, right? Can we get only the date out of date time? It's absolutely possible. That's why the data type comes in the picture, right? Date. These are two different data types. Don't get confused. DateTime and date, both are different things, okay? So go here, all right? Now I'll keep it here, okay? So let's do date, okay? So today, date only, right? Let's call this as a variable, okay? Now this is a little bit different, right? Dates are a little bit different than a normal, primitive data type like strings and booleans, right? It works a little bit different because I'll show you what I meant by that. Now, you need to do a little bit of effort to display today's date using system.now, okay? So this, for now, let me show you what happens if I do system.debug, okay? And today's date. And I wanted to show you one more thing. A little bit of error handling, what happens when you try to assign one data type to another data type. Okay, I think you might have got confused now. I will explain to you just a second. Okay, let me execute this. All right, now we have debug only, okay? So I got null because this is just a blank variable by default, right? By default, in Apex, if you declare any data type with a variable, it gives you null value, right? It means it contains pretty much nothing, right? So let's say, just to make it simplify, right? If you remember yesterday, we did string data type, right? String, say test, right? Now, test will be null because we haven't assigned anything to the test, something like this, right? Right? Let me show you what I meant by system.debug, okay? So if you just only declare, so this is what we call declaring a variable, right? When you say declaring a variable, it means you declare with a data type and a variable name. That's all it is, right? But once you declare a variable, you have to assign it, assign a value to it, right? Because in this case, right, this is, you're only declaring a variable, right? And this is where assignment happens, right? Right? So in this case, the value of test, right? Test will be null, okay? And in this case, the value of test will be, let me show you just a second. Value of test will be hello world, okay? So let me comment this out. If you remember, I showed you how to comment your code. If you wanted to comment a block of code, you put this and / and an asterisk, and then you end the comment with asterisk and the slash again, okay? So now if you run it, you will see the difference, okay? This is how you should test. It's easy to test, and it's very important to understand. You see null and hello world. That's why I said it's very important to understand the concept, right? What happens? Because you might assume, oh, the value of text will be blank. It's not blank. It is null in this case, right? So there's a difference between a blank and null, okay? So Keep that into mind, please. Okay, so similarly, in this scenario, we haven't assigned anything to this date variable, so that's why it's null. Okay, now what happens if I do something like this? Okay, watch this. If I do something like the system.now, okay, now you tell me whether it will work or not work. Let's find out. Okay, see, you got this error. Because you're trying to assign a DateTime value to a date. That means you're trying to assign a value of one data type to another data type, which is illegal, which is not possible, right? So that's one of the things you have to keep into consideration. You can't assign an integer to the string straight away. You have to typecast it. Well, don't get confused. I'll talk about typecasting later, okay? Sorry, my phone is ringing. It's a notification. My apologies for that. If you're hearing that, at times it's annoying. Okay, so what happens is, in this case, this will not work. Now, we have a requirement, right? I wanted to get today's date. Now, how it's possible? Okay, it's pretty straightforward. So as I said, this works pretty different. So what do? Today equals to date dot new instance. You're creating a new instance of a date. Okay, now it expects year, month, and date. Right? Now you might wonder, this is an auto correction. It gives you an option, right? But if you run it, if you run like this, it will give you an error. Okay? Because it says, what is year? Because you haven't defined year anywhere, right? You haven't defined month anywhere. See, there's no month defined there. It's a variable, but where is the definition, right? So if you get an error in future, like, oh, there is no year, there is no month, ideally, you should define integer year, right? Because let me see, right? Now, what happens? It will give a month because there is no variable defined for month. So what do? Month, integer, month, right? Now, if you run again, it will give error again because there is no variable defined for day, right? Because look here, there's no day. So you define, okay. Right, now let's run it. Now, again faulty because remember what I said? This is only declaring it. We haven't assigned it, okay? Now, if these are all null values, right? Because you can't pass the null values to here. You have to assign the value of year, month, and day for this to work, okay? I repeat again, when you define a variable, right? If you don't assign a value to it, it's a null value, okay? Now, in date expects a value, which is not null, right? It expects a value which is not null, okay? Now, in this case, these three values are null, which is not right. So how do you get a value to each, right? That's where this above value comes in the picture, right? We already have today's date, which is a date time, as you know, which is the today's date, right? So what you can do, you can do here equals to, take this boy here, okay, today's date. I know this is a little bit overwhelming because date is a little bit trickier than normal data type. So what I'm going to do year, okay? What I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, I have a date time variable. Give me the year component from the today's date, which is 2021, okay? Then I'm saying, okay, hey, date time, give me the month component, right, which is 01. And then I'm saying, hey, date time, give me the day component, which is day, okay, right? So let's run it and see what happens, okay? Now, I don't want to do the system debug. I'll debug it. I'll put command here, okay? right? So you see, now you might thinking, but just now you said that it is a date, but why I'm seeing this 000, right? Yeah, that's right. But we need to do something else here, okay? That's where a date format comes in the picture, okay? So what we're gonna do, so we can do something like this, dot format. I understand that it's a bit overwhelming, but I'm just trying to demonstrate what a date can do and what a DateTime can do, right? That's all I'm trying to demonstrate here. I'm not trying to teach you the methods or functions behind it, but just for now, try to understand the data type, right? What a date can do, what a DateTime can do, right? So don't worry about the other stuff, okay? Here you go, okay? Now you got MMYY, right? And you can even change it to, you can format it, right? Let's say I want YYY, DDD, okay, probably. I always get confused with this American date standard. I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, right, the method does not exist, so probably I might have mucked that up something. Hang on. All right, for now, just forget about it, okay? So I don't want it to confuse you more. So this is how it is, date and DateTime, right? So so that's two variables we have, right? So now we're going to talk about another data type. So dates are very useful. I've used a lot of data types when I was doing API integration, right? Now, don't get freaked out when I talk about API integration. We're going to cover everything, right? So as I said, once you finish this course, you'll be able to write Apex code. You will be able to write Apex API code. You will be able to consume API code. How cool is that, right? So you're going to walk away from this entire tutorial knowing how to code in Apex, right? I'm not going to teach you Lightning because that's an entirely different beast, right? You have to understand JavaScript and kind of stuff. We'll flag it to some other time of the year, right? Because we got a long way to go in this 2021, okay? Right, now I'm going to remove this, okay? Because we talked about DateTime and date. I hope that is clear. DateTime, you will get date and time. And if you don't want date time, you will just use the date, okay? Nice and simple, right? All right, now we have something called an object data type, okay? Now, object data type is a very strange data type. It accepts absolutely everything, right? So you can use Boolean here, you can use, it's like a generic data type, right? You can use it for pretty much everything you want. I'll tell you what I meant by that. Okay, object T, okay, let's give a meaningful name. Object str, that's called string, right? Object, let's say num, which is like a number, okay? Object, say currency or decimal, okay? Right, now these are all the same data type, right? Object. Now you must be wondering, right? An object data type, right? That's interesting. Because until now you've seen decimal, you have seen what's that called? Double, integer, Boolean, date, dead, right? And what's that? Another one, DateTime, right? Now what is this string, right? And number and decimal doing with the same data type? That's where the object data type comes into picture. It's a generic. It's like a generic thing, right? In life, something very generic. You can, use it for whatever it thinks you want. I mean, it's not. It's like a generic skill, in other words, right? Not a specialized thing, right? So in this case, I can say str equals to hello world, okay? And in this, I can say num equals to 1, right? I can just equals to 1.2. Now you might wonder, right? So all three are valid, okay? Now let me run it to see if I get any error, okay? Oh, sorry, this is DCI. Right? So you see, it works, no problem whatsoever, okay? So I defined 3 different variables of the same data type object, and I passed 3 different values, right, of different data type, right? I defined string, number, decimal. So object is when you are not sure what data you're going to expect, then you can use the object data type. I've used object data type for generic manipulation. So, I mean, you have to choose this data type very wisely, right? Please do not randomly start using it. Oh, okay, instead of number, I'm going to use object. Please no. Stick to the right data type when you know what data type to expect, right? Please do not use object data type if you know you're going to multiply 2 numbers. I would strongly recommend not to use it, okay? Because I've seen some codes, they've extensively used object for even for the simple stuff, which doesn't make any freaking sense, right? So use it wisely, right? You can use it when you're not sure about the type of data type you're getting, right? That's all it is, okay? I hope that makes sense, okay? Now, one thing I wanted to tell you, just one more thing, just don't want to confuse you, but just to let you know, if I have something called integer, right? And let me define a new data type, right? I mean, new variable of data type integer, let's say num1, okay? Now, you might be thinking, you might have something going on in your brain. You must be thinking, this num1 is an integer. So this num1 is an integer. So obviously, you can do num equals to num1, right? Because, an integer, you can always assign a value stored in one variable to another variable, right? Is it confusing? If it's confusing, okay. Let me go back a step back, okay? Let's define 2 variable, okay? Num1, integer, num2, okay? Now, as you know, we can do something like this, right? Pretty straightforward, right? Now, num2 has no value because it's null, okay? This is null because we haven't assigned anything. This is null, okay? Right, okay? And this is 1, okay? Now here, this boy is still null, okay? Now, we can do something here equals to num1. So this is called variable assignment from another variable. Means to say, if you have a variable, let's say an integer variable, you can assign the value of that variable to another variable. So what I mean by that, you have an integer variable, that's num1, right? It has a value of 1, okay? You can assign the value of num1 to num2 because num2 is also an integer, right? See, integer. So at 2 similar data type, you can assign to each other. So this is, you think, is this right? Absolutely, okay? Right, because it works fine. Now, the same logic I wanted to apply here. See, num, here I passed an integer to num1, okay? So here, num, let's say, in this case, the value is 1, okay? Come on. Sorry about that. So the value of num is 1, okay? Now, you must be thinking, okay, that's fantastic. Now, I can do something like this. Let me delete this num2, okay? You must be thinking, I can do pretty much like this, okay? Because just now, what I did num2 equals to num1, right? And you think it works because both are integer, right? Now, when you look at this picture, you think, oh, because num1 has an integer value, I can pretty much do something like this. You're wrong. We can't. Okay, I'll show you why. Because this is an object data type. Even though object can, take whatever data type it wants, if you wanted to specifically assign an object data type to a specific data type, you have to typecast it, right? Typecast means you have to convert this into an integer. You have to specifically tell Apex that, look, I want num1 to go to num2 as an integer. So how to do that? It's pretty straightforward. You put it something like this. You typecasted it. You are explicitly telling Apex num should be integer. End of story. Okay? It works. Same way, if you have a string, okay, and you wanted to pass str to string, this val, if you do this, it will not work. You have to typecast it to string. Okay? This will work, right? So this is one of the interesting data type you have to keep into consideration, right? So, and one more last thing I want to talk about today is the Enum data type, right? Which is an abstract data type. So you define Enum data type as Enum, right? This is the data type Enum, and you define the name of a variable, let's say day, and then you put the value in it, right? You put month, you can put whatever you want. That's why it's an abstract data type, right? So Enum data type is used. Imagine a scenario where if you have to define, let's say, 3 variable Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? There is something called constant in Apex. I will talk about it in our next episode, but for now, constant is something which you will think that value won't change. What I mean by that is, let's say I say string val equals to hello world, right? Now, if you think that value of val will never change, let's assume, you can assume this as a constant, but I'll explain to you syntax and all later. For now, just for sake of argument, imagine the value of val will never change in the application lifecycle. What I mean by that, as long as the program is alive, the value of val will always remain the same. So let's assume it's a constant, right? And we wanted to have 3 different constant, like, so instead of doing 3 different constant, right, you can always use Enum in a simple way, right? Because you can have, it has an error checking in the runtime, sorry, compile time. So it's a very simple example, right? I choose Enum, right? If I wanted to, let's say, if I wanted to compare days in a week, right? And I wanted to check whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? I pretty much use Enum here, right? So let's say I wanted to see whether if it's Monday, so I can always choose day dot Monday, right? And you have to, let's say, will this work? We'll find out. See the variable. Okay, so what I'll do, so we can do, so we have so we do day d, okay. Okay, so what I did, right? I know this is getting a little bit complicated, but bear with me. I try to make it simple, right? This is how a data type works. So Enum is a name, sorry, is a data type, right? And day is the name of a, so this is a data type, right? So this is how the data type works, right? And it contains 3 different values, which is fixed, okay? And that's why I said it's an abstract. You can also do Enum You can put whatever you want. It's your choice. You can put whatever you want. I can put, you know, alien if I want, right? Right? So you can put whatever you want, whatever makes sense, okay? So I defined this here, okay? And then what I did, so I define a variable of this data type day, okay? And then I pass the value of day, D, to I'll put the resource of this below from Apex so that you can read it and understand better, okay? If you still don't understand, you can send me a message or put a comment, right? I will try to explain it again. So what I've done here, okay? So this is as usually known, right? Data type, okay, and variable name. Okay, this is the data type, and this is the name of variable. This is how I define it, enum, okay? I do see one difference. There is no semicolon after it. You don't put it. If you put it, it will complain it. So that's an exception here, okay? Now, what I'm saying is that I want the value of D to be Monday, okay? That's all I want, right? So now when I run it, I think it is, right? It's Monday, okay? Now, you can say, okay, I want it's to be alien. So it will actually display the value of alien. Okay, so enums are used. You don't use enum everywhere, right? It's used in special occasion. As we progress towards the course, I will show you the use of enum in a real example so that it become clear. For now, just remember we have enum data type as well, okay? Then we have another data type called subject, right? Subject, if you're an admin, you know, right? Every record, right? We have an account object, right? An account object is like a table, right? And account object has information, right? Different accounts, like you know, customer name, or let's say, Johnny Walker, just say the name of one customer, or then you have another customer, let's say, Carlsberg, for instance, okay? So the Johnny Walker and Carlsberg are two different records in a customer object, right? So every single record is represented by object, right? An object in Salesforce. So object is a data type. You can use it. So that's very useful. Objects data type when you wanted to, when you're not sure about the types, right? So that's one of the type. We'll talk about that later. So for now, just remember this, okay? And then we have other type, account, right? So one more type I wanted to show you, okay? So we have accounts, right? Account is an object, okay? So account A, so you can do this. Now let's run it. So it works because account is a data type, right? Because it is an object in Salesforce, okay? And it's and any custom object you create, right? You can use, let's say I create a custom object, right? Let's say beer underscore C custom object, right? So you can do this as well, where beer underscore C is a data type, right? This is very useful when you do SQL stuff, right? For now, forget about it, okay? I'm just trying to say that we can do this as well, okay? For now, remember, you have studied four data types, sorry. Date, DateTime, enums, and object, right? That's the four things you studied, okay? And yesterday we talked about Boolean, string, decimal, right? Double, integer, okay? So I highly encourage you to please practice it, right? Please read through the documentation. I will send a link to an Apex documentation. Please read it, understand it. If you don't understand it, please let me know, okay? I try to make it as simple as I can, right? I know that it can get overwhelming. When I started programming for the first time, right, I thought it's a magic because I thought I'm gonna get a new skill, right? A unique skill. Because if you know programming, right, you can do amazing stuff, right? You can build cool things, right? Things which is not, like Facebook is developed by a programmer, right? Your YouTube is developed by a programmer. Every damn thing you use on internet is developed by a programmer, right? So imagine that one day you're going to build a cool stuff on a Salesforce, right? So this is one step towards that goal, okay? So that's all I wanted to talk about it today. Thank you very much for attending. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something today, right? If you think that it's a bit complicated, if you want me to explain it a different way, please do let me know in the comment. I try to do it in a very different way, okay? That being said, greetings and adios. Take care.